I want you to picture a specific moment. Maybe it was this morning sitting in traffic, or maybe it was an argument you had with your partner last night.
Or even just watching a news clip of something, totally horrific.
Yeah, exactly. In that moment, someone acted in a way that seemed maybe inevitable or maybe completely baffling to you.
Yeah.
And you probably asked yourself the question we all ask, which is, why did they just do that?
It's the universal human question. I
Yeah.
mean, we are constantly trying to reverse engineer behavior. We look at an action and we immediately want the cause.
Right. We want the simple label.
We want to say, he shouted because he has a bad temper, or she helped that person because she's just a saint.
We really do crave that one-line explanation.
We do. But the concepts we're doing a deep dive into today, they completely blow their entire approach out of the water.
Which is why I'm so excited to get into this.
Because if you really want to understand a human behavior, whether that's the pull of a trigger or the touch of a hand, you can't just look at the moment it happened. You actually have to look at a timeline.
A timeline.
A timeline that starts 1 second before the action and then stretches back minutes, days, years, centuries, and eventually millions of years.
That sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is a lot.
But it's also incredibly fascinating. So our mission today for this deep dive is to basically decode human behavior by walking this timeline backwards.
Precisely. We are going to deconstruct the why. And to do that, we first have to agree on a very uncomfortable fact about how we judge actions in the first place.
Okay, lay it on me.
The action itself is often entirely meaningless without context.
What do you mean by that?
Think about a hand holding a gun. The finger is squeezing the trigger. Anatomically, biologically, that is a neutral event. Flexor muscles contract, neurons fire. But is that action evil, or is it heroic?
Well, you can't tell just by looking at the hand. I mean, if it's a school shooter, it's evil. But if it's a soldier protecting their unit or a bystander stopping an attack, then it's heroic.
Right. But here's the kicker. The brain uses the exact same motor pathways to do both of those things. Yes. The biology of the crime and the biology of the heroism are identical in that split second. So to understand the difference, we can't just look at the muscle. We have to look at what came before. We have to look at the whole causal web.
And this is where we usually get it wrong, isn't it? We tend to think in these neat little buckets.
Oh, we love buckets.
Yeah.
We say it was genetic or it's hormonal or it's psychological.
Like they're completely separate things.
Right, like they're separate ingredients in a soup. But the research is very clear on this. Those buckets just do not exist in the brain.
They don't exist at all.
Not as isolated drivers, no.
Yeah.
A genetic explanation is really just the setup for hormonal explanation, which acts on a brain structure, which produces a psychological state.
Yeah.
There's one continuous unbroken arc.
You can't pull a single thread out without the whole tapestry unraveling.
Exactly.
So let's trace that thread. Let's go back to our person acting. Maybe they're shouting. Maybe they're hugging someone. The action has happened. Let's hit rewind and go back just 1 second. What is happening inside the skull 1 second before the behavior?
At 1 second out, you're basically witnessing a neurobiological knife fight.
A knife fight.
Yeah, it's a friction point between different parts of the brain that have very, very different agendas.
Okay, so who are the combatants here?
In one corner, you have the amygdala. This is an ancient structure deep in the temporal lobe. It's central to fear, anxiety, aggression. It's basically the alarm bell.
Okay.
In that split second, if the amygdala perceives a threat, it is screaming, react, fight, run.
So that's the gas pedal.
Yes.
Who is the brake?
The frontal cortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex. This is the most recently evolved part of the brain. It's really what makes us human. It handles logic, executive function, long-term planning, and most importantly for this, impulse control.
So in a healthy interaction, the amygdala says, punch that guy because he insulted you. And the prefrontal cortex says, no, that's a terrible idea. You're going to go to jail.
Exactly. It sends inhibitory signals down to the amygdala to quiet it down. It's a top-down regulation. It's saying, calm down. It's not a tiger. It's just a rude email. But, and this is a huge but, that braking system is expensive. It takes a lot of energy.
Expensive how? Like metabolically?
Yes, metabolic energy.
Mm-hmm.
If your frontal cortex is tired or distracted, or say you're hypoglycemic, so you have low blood sugar, it just can't hold the brakes. The inhibition fails, the amygdala wins, and you snap.
Wow, so that literally explains the hangry phenomenon.
It is literal biology. The brakes run out of fuel.
Okay, so that's the immediate mechanical failure, right at the 1 second mark. But the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. Let's step back a bit further, say seconds to minutes before the action. What's influencing that tug of war?
This is where we get into what we call sensory hijacks. We like to think we are these purely rational agents, making decisions based on the facts right in front of us.
Right.
But in the minutes leading up to an action, your brain is processing sensory data, smells, sounds, textures, things that you aren't even consciously aware of. And that data is shifting your behavior.
Give me a concrete example of that.
Let's talk about the insula. It's a fascinating part of the brain. Originally, deep in our evolutionary history, the insula's job was just to detect toxins.
Like poisonous food.
Right. If you bit into a piece of rotten meat, your insula would light up, you'd gag, and you'd spit it out. It was strictly for gustatory disgust.
A survival mechanism. Don't eat the poison.
Exactly. But as humans became more complex and social, evolution did something very thrifty. It repurposed that exact same hardware for moral disgust.
Wow.
So if I tell you about a scandalous crime or some terrible violation of social norms, the exact same part of your brain lights up as if you just ate a cockroach.
That's crazy. So when we say something leaves a bad taste in our mouth, we aren't just being metaphorical.
No, we are being biological.
Right.
And here is where it affects your behavior. If you are in a room that actually smells bad, say there's a garbage can nearby, your insular is already slightly activated. It's primed.
What does that do?
Studies show that in that smelly room, you become statistically more likely to be socially conservative and morally judgmental. No, you are more likely to condemn a wrong behavior simply because your brain is confusing the physical smell of the trash with the moral smell of the person or the idea you're judging.
That is wild. You're judging someone more harshly just because the room smells bad.
Yes. And it works with other senses, too. The warm coffee effect is a really famous one. If you hand someone a warm drink, they actually tend to rate the person they're talking to as having a warmer personality.
But if they're holding an iced drink,
They rate them as colder.
the physical sensation translates directly to social perception.
That creates the lens.
Yeah.
So minutes before you act, your so-called free will is already being nudged by the temperature of your cup and the smell of the room.
Okay, let's widen the scope even more. We're going back hours to days now. So we're entering the realm of hormones, right?
The chemical messengers, yes.
And I assume we have to talk about testosterone, the big bad wolf of hormones.
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
And we have to correct a massive misunderstanding here. Because if you ask most people what testosterone does, they'll say it causes aggression.
Right. Roid rage, bar fights, that kind of thing.
But the data just doesn't support that. Testosterone does not cause aggression. If you take a guy and pump him full of testosterone, he doesn't just become a mindless killing machine. What he becomes is a status-seeking machine.
Status seeking.
Yes. Testosterone lowers the threshold for behaviors that help you maintain or gain status. Now, in many contexts, like a prison yard or a baboon troop, aggression is how you get status. So in those worlds, yes, testosterone increases aggression.
But what if you're in a different kind of world?
This is the really cool part. If you are in a setting where generosity buys you status, say you're at a charity gala, or you're a monk trying to be the most pious, testosterone will actually make you more generous.
Seriously, it makes you nicer.
Yes. It just turns up the volume on whatever behavior makes you look like a winner in your specific culture. It's not an evil hormone. It's a don't disrespect me hormone.
That completely reframes it for me. What about the other side of the coin? Oxytocin, the love hormone.
The cuddly chemical. Oxytocin is famous for bonding mothers to babies and cementing romantic partners. And it definitely does do that. It promotes trust and bonding with us.
With us. Wait, there's a catch there, isn't there?
A huge one. While oxytocin makes you sweeter to your in-group, your us, it actually makes you more aggressive and xenophobic toward them, the out-group.
So it's not some universal love potion.
Not at all. It's a parochial love potion. It sharpens the distinction between friend and foe. If you are stressed or threatened, oxytocin makes you more likely to preemptively attack someone you see as an outsider.
So hours before an action even happens, these hormones are priming us to either defend our status or defend our tribe.
Exactly. They are setting the sensitivity of those neural circuits we talked about earlier.
Let's go back further, days to months. This is where we talk about the physical structure of the brain changing.
Neuroplasticity. The brain is not static. It's constantly remodeling itself based on what you do and what you experience.
I always picture this like a path in a forest. The more you walk it, the clearer and wider it gets.
That's a perfect analogy. But let's look at what stress does to that forest path. If you have been under chronic stress for months, financial worries, a bad job, a health crisis, your body is just soaked in glucocorticoids.
Stress hormones.
Right. And these hormones are actually neurotoxic to specific parts of the brain. They specifically target the hippocampus, which is the part responsible for memory and context. Chronic stress literally causes the hippocampus to atrophy. It shrivels up.
So you lose the ability to recall
You
context.
lose the ability to place things in proper perspective. But at the exact same time, those same stress hormones cause the amygdala, the fear center, to grow. It gets bigger and more hyperreactive.
That is a total recipe for disaster. You're shrinking the context part and supercharging the fear part.
Exactly. So if you see someone fly off the handle over a minor inconvenience, like a waiter getting an order wrong, and you think, what is wrong with them? The answer might be that months of invisible stress have physically re-architected their brain to be all alarm and no assessment.
It really challenges how we judge character, doesn't it? We might think we're judging a personality, but we're just judging biology.
Very often we are. And if we go back years to adolescence, that disconnect becomes even more obvious.
The teenage brain, as a parent, I definitely feel this one.
It's a very unique developmental window. We talked about the amygdala and the frontal cortex, the engine and the brakes. Well, in teenagers, there is a massive developmental lag between the two.
The engine is ready, but the brakes aren't.
Correct. The limbic system, which drives emotion and reward seeking, is fully online. It's firing on all cylinders. But the frontal cortex doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s.
So you essentially have a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes.
And that seems like a terrible design flaw, right?
Yeah?
I mean, why would evolution build a creature that is high risk and low judgment?
It sounds like a great way to get eaten by a predator.
Right, unless you view it through the lens of leaving the nest. Think about it. If you were perfectly rational, safe, and risk-averse at 16, you would never leave your parents' cave. You'd never find a mate. You'd never explore new territory.
Oh, I see.
Evolution needs you to be a little bit insane during those years just to push you out into the world.
So the risk-taking is actually a feature, not a bug.
It is. But it means that actions taken during that window are heavily biased by peer pressure and impulse simply because the hardware to resist them isn't finished building yet.
Let's keep moving back, before adolescence. Back to childhood, and even the room. This brings us to genetics.
And this is where we have to be very, very careful. Because this is what people tend to say, it's in his DNA, as if that just settles the whole thing.
Right, like the whole warrior gene concept.
We really need to talk about epigenetics here. The old model was that genes are a blueprint. You know, you have the gene for height, you get tall. The new model is that genes are more like a library. You have all the books, but the environment determines which books you can actually read.
The environment turns the genes on and off.
Exactly. It's like a volume knob. Let's look at that warrior gene you mentioned, MAOA. There is a variant of this gene that is statistically associated with antisocial violence.
So if you have it, you're doomed to be violent.
No. And this is the crucial finding. If you have this risky gene variant and you are raised in a severe abusive environment, your risk of violence shoots through the roof.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you have that exact same gene variant, but you are raised in a loving, secure, warm environment, your risk of violence is zero. You are statistically indistinguishable from anyone else who doesn't have the gene.
Wow. So the gene itself doesn't cause the violence.
The gene makes you sensitive to the environment. It acts as a multiplier. If the environment is bad, the gene amplifies it. If the environment is good, the gene is basically irrelevant.
That completely destroys the whole nature versus nurture debate.
Because it's not nature versus nurture. It's nature via nurture. You cannot talk about a gene's effect without asking about the environment it is living in.
We've gone back an entire lifetime now. But our timeline keeps going. We have to look at centuries. How does history live in our brains today?
This is where we look at culture. Cultural norms aren't just random rules people made up. They're often adaptations to the specific environment our ancestors lived in. And those adaptations leave a physiological mark.
There's a great example of this with rice versus wheat. Right?
Or rice versus herding, yeah. Think about traditional rice farming in southern China. To grow rice, you need massive irrigation systems. You have to reshape entire mountains. You can't do that alone. You need the whole village to cooperate. If you fight with your neighbor, the irrigation fails and you both starve.
So that creates a very collectivist culture.
We before me. Now contrast that with a herding culture, like the Scots-Irish or the Bedouins or the settlers of the American West. You are out there alone with your animals. Your entire wealth, your herd, can be stolen in a single night.
So you have to be tough. You have to handle it yourself.
You have to develop a culture of honor. You have to project this hair-trigger willingness to use violence. You have to signal to everyone, if you cross me, I will hurt you, so that nobody even tries to steal your livelihood.
And this cultural history still affects us today.
It really does. There was an amazing study done at the University of Michigan where they insulted students. Some were from the American North and some from the South. And the South was historically settled by herding cultures.
What happened when they insulted them?
The Southerners didn't just get subjectively angrier. Their cortisol spiked higher. Their testosterone surged. Their physiology reacted to the verbal insult as a genuine physical threat, purely because of a cultural script written centuries ago by ancestors who were protecting sheep.
That is incredible. We are literally walking around with the ghosts of our ancestors' survival strategies.
We are. And finally, that brings us to the very start of the line, millions of years ago. Evolution itself.
The survival of the fittest.
Which is so often misinterpreted. We hear survival of the fittest, and we immediately think survival of the meanest. We assume that deep down, we are just selfish apes, and civilization is just this thin crust over our natural violence.
Right, the idea that if you scratch the surface, you find the beast underneath.
But evolutionary biology actually pushes back on that hard. We are an incredibly cooperative species. We evolved mechanisms like reciprocal altruism.
Like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Or I regurgitate blood for you, you regurgitate blood for me.
Vampire bats?
Yes, vampire bats. If a bat fails to get food one night, another bat will actually share its meal. Why? Because they live in a system where they know the favor will be returned later. The biological contract.
So cooperation isn't just a nice moral idea, it's a winning evolutionary strategy.
It is. We are hardwired to help just as much as we are hardwired to compete. It really just depends on who we are interacting with.
Which brings us to the final major theme that runs through this entire timeline we've been discussing, the divide between us and them.
This is the fundamental categorization the brain makes, and it happens incredibly fast. If I put you in a brain scanner and flash a face of someone of a different race or an enemy group, your amygdala activates in less than 100 milliseconds.
That's way faster than conscious thought.
Much faster. Before you even know what you are looking at, your brain has flagged difference as potential threat.
That sounds really depressing. Are we just hardwired to be bigoted?
No. And this is the most important takeaway of all. We are hardwired to categorize, yes. But the categories themselves are malleable. We can change who belongs in the us bucket almost instantly.
How do we do that?
Think about sports. You might absolutely hate a player from a rival team. He is definitely a them. But if he gets traded to your team and puts on your team's jersey, your brain remaps him. He is now us. You cheer for him. The actual amygdala response in your brain changes.
So we can hack the system. We can actively expand the us.
We can, but we have to be smart about how we do it. We often think empathy is the ultimate tool to fix the world. Like, if I just feel your pain, I'll be a better person.
Is that not true? Empathy seems pretty important.
Empathy is a physical resonance.
Yeah.
If you are in pain, and I have high empathy, I literally feel your pain. My pain centers light up. The problem is, if that pain becomes too intense, I will unconsciously turn away just to protect myself. It leads to severe burnout.
Oh, so what's the alternative then?
Compassion. Compassion is a step removed.
Yeah.
It is saying, I understand your suffering and I want to help, but it maintains a degree of detachment. It allows you to actually take action without being completely paralyzed by the shared distress.
That is a really crucial distinction. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the split second in the synapse all the way back to millions of years of evolution. I have to ask the big question here. If our behavior is so heavily determined by biology, history, and environment, where is free will?
This is the heavy one. We call this mitigated free will. The reality is, the more we learn about the biology, about the tumor pressing on the brain or the childhood trauma or the lead poisoning, the smaller the gap for pure free will becomes.
It kind of feels like we are just biological robots reacting to stimuli.
It can definitely feel that way, but I choose to look at it differently.
Right.
This knowledge actually drives out hate. If you realize that a person's behavior is the result of a damaged frontal cortex and a history of severe abuse, it shifts you from judgment to understanding. You don't have to hate the broken machine, you just have to try to fix it or protect yourself from it.
But we aren't totally helpless, right? Biology isn't strict destiny.
No, it's not. We are predisposed, but not predestined.
Yeah.
And the absolute best example of this, the one that always gives me hope, is the Christmas truce of 1914.
World War I.
Yes. Picture it. You have thousands of British and German soldiers in the trenches. It's freezing cold. They've been meticulously conditioned to kill. They're pumped full of testosterone and cortisol. The propaganda has painted the enemy as absolute monsters. The us versus them divide is as absolute as it gets. And yet, on Christmas morning, they stopped. They climbed out of the trenches. They walked into no man's land. They shook hands. They shared cigarettes and pudding. They literally played soccer together.
Right in the middle of a brutal war.
For a few hours, those men used their frontal cortex to override the training, override the fear, and actively expand their definition of us to include the guys in the other trench. They proved that we can choose to disobey our programming.
That is incredibly powerful. It suggests that understanding these mechanisms is actually the key to controlling them.
Exactly. If you know that you are irritable just because you are hungry, or that you are judging someone because they look different, you can pause. You can engage the brakes. You can choose the what, even if you can't totally control the why.
I love that. Knowing the why gives us the freedom to choose the what.
That's the whole mission.
Well, we have certainly peeled back the layers today. From the split-second tug-of-war in the skull to the survival strategies of our ancient ancestors.
It really makes the world look a little different when you start to see the strings attached to everyone's behavior.
It does. So, here is a thought to leave you with. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic, or a coworker snaps at you, or you see something crazy on the news, try to pause. Look past the action itself. Can you see the invisible timeline floating behind them?
Can you see the molecular scars? Can you see the evolutionary ghost steering their wheel?
And if you can, does it change how you react?
And maybe even more importantly, can you see it in yourself?
That is the real challenge. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.